All right, well, welcome everyone. You should be muted as you join the webinar, and I'm just going to ask you to stay on mute until the end of the presentation when we can open it up for questions. There is a Q&A function and a chat function at the bottom of your screen there. I'll keep an eye on that. Feel free to type in your questions as you think of them. We are recording this session, and I'll follow up next week with the slide deck and recording for folks who registered. But let's get going. So today we're welcoming two presenters from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency out of the Washington, D.C. headquarters to talk about some important programs that are definitely of interest to NEBRA members. So I'm glad to introduce Jerome Oliver and Tess Richmond, and just some short bios for both of them since I see they both have LinkedIn profiles. I don't want to leave a lot of time for questions. But Jerome Oliver is a PhD environmental microbiologist with EPA's Sustainable Communities and Infrastructure branch, which I didn't even know they had under the Office of Water. And he's with the Office of Wastewater Management under the Office of Water. He's been working at EPA for about 5 years now. And prior to that, he worked as a technology assistant at the National Science Foundation. Tess Richmond is a biologist with the Biosolids program, which is also located in the Office of Water under the Office of Science and Technology. She's been with the program for a while now, having started working for the Biosolids program as an ORISE fellow. If you don't know what ORISE is, Google it, check it out. It's pretty impressive. She has a BA from Lawrence University in biology and economics. So I will ask Dr. Oliver to turn on his screen, take over the screen sharing, and kick us off with the Clean Water Technology Center. Looks good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you all can see my screen perfect. Thank you so much, Janine.
Perfect.
All right, so we will get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Like Janine said, my name is Jerome Oliver. I'm an environmental microbiologist in the Office of Wastewater Management. And she said all the other things, which is a skip. And I'll be doing a brief overview on the Clean Water Technology Center and the Searchable Clearinghouse of Wastewater Technology, also known as SCOUT. Alrighty, so this is kind of the main portion of the Clean Water Technology Center. So in the Office of Wastewater Management, the Clean Water Technology Center encompasses personnel who have experts in various fields, ranging from engineers to scientists. And the mission of the Clean Water Technology Center, also I'll be saying either tech center or tech team, depending interchangeably, is to help communities address local water challenges and move towards greater sustainability by building their capacity to deploy innovative and alternative technologies that recover nutrients, extract energy, reuse water, increase efficiency, and address impacts related to emerging contaminants. So what that kind of means is that basically we are trying to tackle all aspects of water challenges, and this is demonstrated in the different materials and services that we provide. As stated here in the blue text, I am looking at multiple screens in the blue text here. We are focused on enabling holistic and realistic wastewater management options and solutions for communities of all sizes. In the end of this, I will definitely try to give you a list of links. I was trying to put it in earlier, but I was having a little technical difficulties, but a list of all the links that's going to be connected to the documents and such that we're talking about. But I will send you a link for the main page for the Clean Water Technology Center. So now we're going to kind of get into the focus of what we kind of try and work on. So our focus areas and activities. So the main focus areas of the Tech Center are, first, technical expertise. We track the state of the science. This entails looking at new technologies and research that comes out. We also have talks with new innovators in our respective fields. So we have talks as a group just to see new things that may be coming out that might be helping in different areas. And then we also attend and do talks at various conferences about new materials or tools we've created for our various stakeholders to learn more information. And then if we can ever tie in having ways of funding these opportunities as well, we try to do that. One of the examples, which is the most recent one of my colleagues, and though it might not be in biosolids, was done by one of my colleagues in the Tech Center at the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authority, also known as CIFA. And in that, the two documents that we just put out, both touched on what the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and their connections with intelligent water systems. So those links I will also provide, but it goes into basically kind of showing how you can use intelligent systems and being able to get that funding necessary to do so. The next thing I will touch on is technology assessment. So we conduct technology assessments that touch on related topics for different audiences. Examples include our nutrient removal technology report, which looked at 5 facilities in the US and 1 in Canada that implemented innovative technologies or process enhancements designed to significantly intensify treatment or enhance the removal of nitrogen and phosphorus species. So that's one of the reports that we have on there as well. Another example is emerging contaminants. So we have a document on emerging contaminants that give resources that touch on a list of contaminants, such as things like PFAS, which has been, of course, one of the hot topics. So I'll also provide the link for that as well. So these are just a few of the different resources that we have as far as that, but there's plenty more on that same site. Next is our outreach and partnership. So the tech team tries to facilitate partnerships within the agency and with other federal partners. This occurs on the Searchable Clearinghouse of Wastewater Technology, also known as SCOUT, where we have resources from particular federal partners, which were the wateroperators.org. We have Northwest Biosolids and the Department of Energy, just to name a few. And then we also have, so currently right now we have actually 3 clearinghouses, and one of which was more kind of the inner agency connections when it comes to creating a water reuse clearinghouse. So the next thing is that we also coordinate efforts with other areas of EPA, and then it's in the area of funding. So we try to look at it this way. So Scout and our Clean Water Tech Center, we look at and focus on technology, but once you've looked and find or identified the technologies that might best help you, now you have to worry about funding and how do we be able to get these things done. And so we try to find different ways where we can connect. So of course I talked about the Clean Water SRF earlier. So that's one of the ways. But I want to say, as just as a broad scope of things, the Clean Water Technology Center as well as Scout is all kind of technology based. So all the things you would find is technologies that may connect with biosolids or other entities as far as moving forward. So next we will be going into an introduction into Scout. So I've been talking about this Scout, going around about this Scout, but you're probably wondering, what is Scout? So here we go. So Scout is an information sharing platform that provides resources on the cost effectiveness and performance of innovative, alternative, and reuse wastewater technology. So it provides resources to help audiences to make informed decisions on technology and what may be the best technology for that community. So that's just a basis on it. So now you're probably wondering how it came about. Like, why did EPA decide that this is something that we need to put forth for the community? And so that comes into the congressional directive. So specifically, there was a congressional directive, the American Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. And so it had these basic requirements, which was one, to develop a clearinghouse to disseminate information on wastewater technology, that it included cost-effective and alternative wastewater recycling and treatment technologies. And then the third ask is that there's a much information on centralized technologies and information, but maybe not as much in the area of decentralized. So they wanted to also have a focus for those individuals and those communities that have decentralized systems, so that it has that kind of coverage. So with these 3 main requirements, EPA's response or thought process was to develop a public-facing site or clearinghouse where you'll be able to disseminate this information and for you all to kind of navigate it. So that's kind of the basis of what Scout was created for. So now we're going to kind of get into the vision of Scout. And bear with me as this is going to be a verbatim read off of the screen. So it is a community of empowered wastewater utilities and on-site decentralized systems that can improve the effectiveness of infrastructure decision making and provide exceptional, sustainable service to their communities. In short, basically, we are trying to make sure that we put forth information that can help whichever audience, small, mid-sized, and we'll go into that in the strategic objectives in a minute, but to be able to help our community and our customers identify what might work best for them. So like I said, moving into the strategic objective, let me know if I'm going too fast as well, but I'm getting close to the end-ish for this portion. But so these are the strategic objectives. So, like I said, to help small and mid-sized communities make informed, cost-effective choices about proven wastewater technologies. So, like I said, but it's not just for just small and mid-sized. So it can be if you're trying to find information on particular technologies, references. So it covers more than that. So it covers in the essence of public in general. Um, like I said, that it would be effectively address the unique needs of on-site and decentralized systems or the community. Um, Simplify information collection. Nothing is worse than having to go to multiple websites just to try to identify the resources you need. And so we wanted everything to be housed in one particular space. And then last but not least, definitely touching on promoting collaborative information sharing. So on that, like I said before, and I'm going to also put in the link, basically this is a hub. So the idea is if there is documents that are not on our current Scout, that is technology focused but falls into different areas, you can submit it. So I'm kind of pitching here in here as well. Hopefully I'm not stepping on Nebra's feet there too much, but the idea of being able to add resources to Scout that will be able to help communities in the various areas. So with that said, you're probably wondering, what do we have on Scout? So here's the things you will find at Scout. So there are reports, there are articles and journals, case studies, fact sheets. We have past presentations and the pending webinars. I'm going to put my little pointer so I can get to the screen. Perfect. And so, as I stated, we have all these different resources, and at this point you're saying maybe we have hundreds of resources, which we do, and they're in very different areas. Are you going to be spending time scrolling through multiple pages to identify these things? No, we're trying to make this as efficient and work as best for you. So actually here on the right side of my screen, it basically tells you how you can search. So you can search by topic, focus area, scope, author type, and date. This gray box that I have here is an example of focus areas. So as you check off the boxes, you can then hit the filter button and it will filter. Something else that's not written here, but you can also filter based on a map. So there's another function where you can click on your particular state. And if you have resources that are specific, it will pull up. So there's multiple ways to, I guess, crack this egg, so to speak. So next, I want to kind of share with you what we kind of have as far as resources. This is, keep in mind, this is from last year. We haven't done an update on looking at what we've added so far, as well as site visits. But basically, this is showing you the different clearinghouses we have, the amount of resources we have in each, as well as how much people have visited the site. And that was of 2023. I want to say at least in the December timeframe. So we're building traction, we're getting more individuals. But like I said, in our about section as well on Scout, there is a video that kind of teaches you kind of how to navigate, but it's pretty user friendly. And if it's not, we have a submit feedback section as well, to let us know, give or take, how that is, as well as how to add it, as well as we have a review criterion of what is necessary. Because as we put these things on our site, for instance, if it's a paper, it needs to be able to be public. So if there's copyright situations, there's the licensing kind of agreement that allows for us to share your things so that you don't try and, come back at us for that. With that, I'm moving into the very last thing in my talk, which is Scout, like I said, has technology. And so once you find your technology, now it's wondering, how do I fund this? How do I find ways to fund it? So we decided to also add on there, as of right now, a technical assistance provider map. So in this map, you can actually click on your state, choose your filter, and then it will give you a list of technical assistance providers. So I'm actually kind of connecting as well with our talker Tess, where she'll be talking about stuff on lagoons. So now you can look for a TA provider that might be able to help you to find funds for the lagoons or find funds for whatever you may need. So this is just a site. Like I said, I'm going to give the list of links with their particular names, as well as more or less, I think some will be distributed later as well. So with that, I will leave with my contact information at the top. The other individual, which is Smita Nepal, also works with me on Scout, but she's a very, very good resource when it comes to emerging contaminants, as well as funding that connects with emerging contaminants as well. The QR code in the top is just the Scout main website, but I can send that as well. And with that, I will end. Stop sharing.
All right. I didn't ask if you wanted to take questions now, or we'll just go into Tess's presentation. Someone's already asking for the links, so you can maybe work on that while Tess is talking to us about lagoons.
Great. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Just 1 second.
All right, thanks.
I'm not sharing, am I, Janine?
Not at the moment.
No, it's not sharing. Okay, hold on. Okay, how about now?
Yes, but not presentation mode.
Great.
It's yeah, perfect. Now I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so just to note, I can't see the chat, unfortunately, as I give these slides. So Janine, I don't know if you
I'll monitor it.
Okay, great. So these are
away.
going to be in a couple sections. So what I'll do is probably pause after each section and see if there's questions so we can address them before we move on.
All right.
Great. So just to restate, my name is Tess Richmond. I work in EPA's Biosolids program, and today we're going to be talking about BMPs for a land application of sewage sludge that's been removed from a lagoon. Standard disclaimer, these are my views. They are not the views of the US EPA. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is a document we published back in February of this year called Understanding Lagoon Requirements under 40 CFR Part 503, Best Management Practices for Use or Disposal of Sewage Sludge. This is Part 1, Land Application of Sewage Sludge. There'll be a Part 2 in the future, which will cover in-place closure of lagoons. So this is just going to be for the beneficial use. There's hyperlinks to this document, and it's available on our website. So the purpose of the document, obviously, is best management practices for land application of sewage sludge, but kind of the background of why this was written is because we know that as excess sewage sludge accumulates in lagoons, their functionality is reduced and they become less effective. One of the best ways to increase that function is to remove sewage sludge from the lagoon to increase detention time, and that's been shown to improve permit compliance for things like BOD and TSS and ammonia. Removal of sludge also allows the operators to make infrastructure repairs as it's emptied. So I think, or hopefully we all know that Part 503 has land application requirements for sewage sludge, but we get a lot of questions about how those requirements apply to sewage sludge that's been removed from a lagoon, because that scenario isn't specifically addressed in the regulation. So this document just provides a summary of the Part 503 requirements and BMPs for meeting those requirements when sewage sludge has been removed from a wastewater lagoon. So just kind of to ground this discussion, we're talking about the Biosolids program. That's under the Clean Water Act, Section 405. That section of the Clean Water Act essentially required the EPA to do two things. One of them was to establish a rule, which we call Standards for the Use or Disposal of Sewage Sludge. It's codified at 40 CFR Part 503. So we often shorthand that to Part 503. So Part 503 establishes requirements for the final use and disposal of sewage sludge, including land application, among other things. Okay, So what this document addresses is the most common scenario when sewage sludge is removed from a lagoon for land application. So that would be a bulk sewage sludge, not bagged, Class B, an application to land with what the rule calls low potential for human exposures. That would be agricultural sites, forests, and reclamation sites. We know that there are other practices that land application has or that lagoon sludge can be used for, but they're not as common, and so they're not covered in this document. So like I said, it's not going to be for things like bagged sewage sludge for Class A, application to lands with high potential for human exposure. So that's homes and gardens, golf courses, parks, etc. It's also not going to cover the other management practices like landfilling or in-place closure. It's not going to cover BMPs for things that aren't requirements in Part 503. So things like dewatering might be a common practice, but because dewatering isn't a requirement in Part 503, there's no BMPs in this document for that. It's also only going to cover the federal requirements. So there might be more state and local requirements or permit conditions. And the document doesn't cover operation or maintenance of wastewater lagoon. So I've linked here, there are plenty of EPA resources that are relatively new about lagoon operation and compliance, and those are great, but they're not going to be in this document. Okay, so the main contents of we call it the Lagoon BMP document, are going to be 3 steps. Getting ready, which is going to be planning for your lagoon clean out. Step 2, get set, which is going to be gathering your data and doing the analysis. And then step 3, which is going to be land application and site specific requirements. I have numbered the document how it's, or sorry, I should say I've numbered this presentation how it's numbered in the document. So there's a section 1 in the document that's just your background and your introduction. So everything that you see here in the presentation is true to the document to make it easier to go and find more information about these resources. So get ready, get set, get or go are going to be in sections 2, 3, and 4 of the Lagoon document. Okay, so kind of the first real chunk of this document is going to be get ready. So you're planning. So there's 4 sections in Get Ready. So submitting a plan, permitting, your infrastructure assessment, and costs and funding. None of these steps are requirements in Part 503, but we've included them because we think they're important steps for considering before you do a sewage sludge cleanup, and because there are lots of resources from states and localities that EPA doesn't cover that we think you should still consider. So what I've highlighted here is section 2.4, costs and funding. That's really where EPA comes in. So the highlighted sections or the bolded sections here are going to be the ones that I'm really going to focus on. Okay, so costs and fundings. We've heard in the past that some folks have had problems getting their lagoon clean out certified or eligible for SRF funding. And EPA believes that sludge removal from a lagoon is not a routine operation and maintenance practice. So sewage sludge removal should be considered for SRF funding. It's infrastructure rehabilitation. And we've made that clear. It's in the document, and it's that's what's on the right side of the screen is a segment from the Clean Water SRF newsletter that states that EPA believes that sewage sludge lagoon removal is not O&M and is eligible for Clean Water SRF funding. So with that, the bipartisan infrastructure law signed in November of 2021 provides almost $12 billion in additional funding for things like lagoon cleanouts. So I've linked here this highlighted blue text. Will get you to a site with more information on how you can apply for Clean Water SRF funding for lagoon cleanout. So before I move on to section 3, Janine, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions. If someone has a question, you can also raise your hand. That's an option down at the bottom, and I'll unmute you and you can ask directly, but doesn't look
pause
like...
and take a sip of water and give people a second.
Yeah, good. Pat the dog. No, don't get him riled up. Yeah, no, nothing
Okay.
yet.
Great. So we'll move on to section 3, which is going to be assessment and analysis. So there's 6 sections or subsections in this section. I'm going to talk about the 4 that I think we get the most questions about, and that are the most not self-explanatory. But you can obviously find more information about the sections that I'll talk about and the others that I'm not going to highlight in the document itself. So, sampling. Sampling sewage sludge to comply with the Part 503 requirements for chemical pollutants, for pathogens, and for VAR have to know the volume of the sewage sludge that's going to be removed from a lagoon. However, to estimate the volume, you have to map the lagoon and then take some samples. So what we recommend is doing a preliminary assessment of your sewage sludge to understand the volume of sewage sludge that is going to be removed, to help you understand then how many samples you have to take to meet the requirement. So if that volume is right on the edge, or if it were to exceed the volume, the initial volume that you thought, and I'll go through the tiers in just a second, that you wouldn't be in compliance for the minimum number of samples that needed to be taken. So what we recommend is if you're right on the edge, either going up to the next volume and the next minimum number of samples, or I mean, that's really what we recommend. So it's an iterative process though, because you have to take some samples, but you have to know the volume of the lagoon, the sludge that you're going to remove from the lagoon in order to take the right amount of samples. So it's really iterative, and you need to be kind of going back and checking your math as you move through the process. So there is no formula in Part 503 to estimate the volume of sewage sludge removed from a lagoon. So what we've done in this document is provided 2 potential formulas that will help you calculate the amount of sewage sludge that's going to be removed from the lagoon, whether that sludge is in a liquid form or in a cake form. These are not cut and dry formulas, and they're only going to provide you with a very rough estimate, because they don't consider how different layers of sludge might have different densities and how that would affect the volume. So in many cases, a sewage sludge lagoon operator is going to benefit from using a specialized contractor or engineer to help with this. But if you want to get a sense of how much sludge is in your lagoon in order to meet your minimum number of samples, you can use the formulas that are provided in the document. So when we talk about the minimum number of samples required, Part 503 has a frequency of monitoring requirement that's based on the amount of sewage sludge that you're going to use or dispose of annually. For a lagoon cleanout, that can be thought of as the volume of sludge that you're going to remove from the lagoon and apply in a given year. So when we say something is the minimum number of samples required for the frequency would be once per year. For a sewage sludge lagoon cleanout, that would be considered as 1 sample. The next thing that you're going to have to consider is that the minimum number of samples that are required are different to meet your pollutant, your chemical pollutant requirements, and your pathogen requirements. So for a fecal coliform, you need a geometric mean that's taken by 7 samples. So just when you think about that here, so if your sludge volume is greater than 0 but less than 290 dry metric tons, to meet the minimum, the frequency of monitoring requirements, you would need 1 sample for your chemical pollutant limits. You need 7 samples to meet your fecal coliform. Same thing, if your sludge volume is between 290 and 1500 dimetric tons, you need 4 samples to meet your chemical pollutant limits, but you need 28, which is 4 times 7, to meet your fecal coliform requirements. And this can also be thought of as 1 per cell. So if you're doing this for multiple cells, this applies to each cell. If you were to remove all the sludge into like a homogeneous pile, this would just apply to the pile. So even though we have these minimum number of samples required, there's another requirement in Part 503 that your samples have to be representative. So in some cases, an individual grab sample is not going to be adequately representative to be called a representative sample, right? So you could only be required to take one sample from a lagoon based on the frequency of monitoring requirements, but that's not going to be representative of the sludge that's in the lagoon. So mapping the lagoon before you take samples will help you account for things like where your influent is, where your effluent is, where mounding might be, where the different layers are, and that will help you take the appropriate number of samples.
Tess, there was a question in the chat. Are you talking about composite or grab samples? Just grabs?
So these are grabs.
So, but you're mapping where you're getting them from.
Right. And
Okay.
this representative sampling, right? Like one grab sample is not representative.
Right.
So if you want to think of it as one composite sample and you need to be taking multiple grab samples for that to be representative, that would be a good thought.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Can you grab samples in different locations and composite it as one? Okay, as long as you document where you took them.
Okay, so jumping ahead to pathogen requirements. So again, we're talking about the most common scenario in this document, so I'm only going to be talking about the Class B pathogen requirements. So there's 3 alternatives in Part 503 for meeting the Class B pathogen requirements, but they're not all going to be applicable for sewage sludge removed from a lagoon. So in most cases, we would say that you must meet alternative 1, which is a geometric mean for fecal coliform. In rare cases, you might be able to choose alternative 2, but the lagoon operator should work with their permitting authority to make sure that that's appropriate for their lagoon. So alternative 1, like I said, is 7 samples of treated sewage sludge shall be collected, and the geometric mean of the fecal coliform density will be less than 2 million colony forming units, or most probable number in a dry weight basis. So we recommend that to meet this requirement, you use EPA method 1680 or 1681. There are other available methods, but like I said, this is a BMP document, so that's what we recommend. So in order to use these methods, the sewage sludge from Lagoon has to be held at 10 degrees Celsius or less, but not frozen during transport. And then the testing must occur within 8 hours from the time of collection. So we know that for some lagoons, this is going to be difficult to meet. So we recommend that you contact a lab several days in advance so that they know that they have to start the test from within 8 hours from when it was collected. And that way they don't store it or they don't start the test and that wouldn't be considered compliant anymore. So again, like we said, the samples have to be representative. So if a facility were to store treated sewage sludge before they applied it after taking this test for some long period of time, then the microbial sampling should be taken after storage. So the goal is really to take these tests just prior to application so that you know what you are applying the land. Okay. Section 3.5 is on vector attraction reduction, or VAR. So again, there's 10 options in Part 503 for meeting the VAR requirements, but they're not all going to be applicable for sewage sludge removed from a lagoon. So in most cases, the 3 options that are going to make the most sense are option 2, volatile solid reduction, option 9, injection, or option 10, incorporation. So in rare cases, the operator might be able to use options 5, 6, or 8, but those are going to require additional treatment after the sludge has been removed from the lagoon. You should work with your permitting authority before exploring those options. So I'll pause here for questions on this section.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
This is an interesting, somebody's very curious. Is lagoon sludge higher in nitrogen than sludge from a conventional activated sludge facility? Do you know at all?
I don't know. We can definitely talk about that offline or look into it, but offhand, I don't know.
Maybe someone at the end will know the answer. Yeah, that's interesting. It could be. So that's it for questions right now.
Okay, great. So then skipping to section 4, which is going to be the site-specific land application requirements. So there's 7 sections. I'm really just going to talk about nitrogen. But we can, if we have time, we can always talk about the other sections. We'll leave time for questions as well. Okay, so Part 503 requires that all sewage sludge that's land applied be applied equal to or less than the agronomic rate for nitrogen. Calculating agronomic rate is a very complex process, and it requires site-specific information and soil testing. So we're not going to talk about that in this document. But what we are going to talk about is how you can use the nitrogen analysis from sewage sludge in the lagoon to understand generally the size of the land base or the number of acres that you'll need for a land application event, because that'll help you with costs and feasibility. Okay, so section 4.1 of the document, 4.1.1 and 4.1.2 talk about how you can estimate plant available nitrogen, and then how you can use plant available nitrogen or PAN to estimate your land base. So I'm not going to go through all of the calculations today. They're all in the document, and they have examples as well, and we can talk about them more. But essentially, the estimates of, once you calculate PAN using the formulas that we've provided in the document, then you can take the volume of the sewage sludge that you've estimated and use PAN in the volume of sludge to understand how much land base you'll need based on the average nitrogen requirement of a crop, which is also provided in the document, to understand the number of land base. And that, like I said, that can help you with costs and feasibility, because in a lot of cases, sludge removed from lagoon is going to be very liquid. And so you're not going to want to transport that very far, because that would be very expensive. So the closer you can get to your lagoon, the more cost effective it will be. And so you want to know how many acres you need. So like I said, there's no formula in Part 503 for calculating PAN or estimating land base or agronomic rate, but we've provided some potential formulas that will give you, again, a rough estimate that'll help you in your planning purposes. So I think that's actually all I have. I kind of rushed through that, assuming there'd be a lot more questions. So I have the document open. If there are others, we can talk about either sections that I didn't go through, or if there are more specific questions. And I also have my contact